I returned to my home after an arduous work trip that lasted for 3 full weeks. My heart ached with longing, a longing that permeated every cell of my being, an overwhelming yearning for my wife, for her laughter that brightens my days, and for the warmth of our home that my soul had grown accustomed to. I turned the key in the door lock. The metal was cold under my fingertips, which trembled slightly from sheer anticipation. I pushed the door open gently, and I was greeted in the hallway by a strange scent, not at all familiar to me, a complex mixture of something faintly earthy, like the aroma of damp soil after a light rain, and a sweet feminine perfume I didn't recognize as one of my wife's usual fragrances. My heart constricted a little, but I attributed it to her perhaps trying a new air freshener or incense. I called out my wife's name, the name I love, and her voice came from the living room, carrying a quiet tone, perhaps quieter than necessary. Moments later, she appeared, a faint smile gracing her face, a smile that couldn't quite reach the sparkle in her eyes, which had dimmed a little. I embraced her tightly, trying to draw some reassurance from her closeness, but I felt a strange coldness in her body, or perhaps it was just my own exhaustion after the weariness of the long journey and the hardship of the road. "I missed you so much," I whispered in her ear, burying my face in her hair, from which that new scent emanated. She replied in a faint voice, barely audible, "Me too. I missed you." There was a certain coolness in her voice, something I had never known from her. Then, from behind her legs, where she stood as if shielding something, an orange-colored creature emerged, with thick, elegant fur. It was a medium-sized cat, lithe in build, but what truly froze the blood in my veins, and made my breath catch, was the look in its eyes. They were wide, a radiant amber color, clear as if they were polished gemstones, staring at me with an unsettling steadiness, with a strange confidence, completely devoid of any familiar feline expression like gentleness or childish curiosity. I felt the power of those gazes, as if they were piercing through the layers of my skin, bypassing my bones, to reach the depths of my soul, exploring its secrets and hidden corners without permission, shamelessly. An unwarranted, cold shiver ran through me, like a light electric current. "What is this beautiful creature?" I asked, trying hard to hide the unease that was beginning to creep into my voice. My wife smiled, a slightly wider smile this time, but it still carried that pale shadow. She bent down gracefully and said in a voice that seemed to carry some pride, "Oh, this is Ginger. Isn't he lovely? I found him on the doorstep about 2 weeks ago, on a stormy night. He looked so lonely and miserable, shivering from cold and hunger, so my heart wouldn't let me leave him. I took him in." She bent further and stroked his head gently. The cat raised its long, bushy tail like an orange flag and began to purr deeply, not like the ordinary purr of cats that resembles the cooing of doves, but deeper and more resonant, not without its own strangeness, as if it came from a chest much larger than a cat's. At first, I tried not to pay much attention to it. I told myself, over and over, that she must have felt a crushing loneliness during my long absence, and that having a pet in the house might be a comfort to her, a silent companion to fill some of the void I had left. The first few days after my return were somewhat normal, or so I tried to convince myself. We resumed our daily routine, although I noticed with a worried eye that my wife was spending significantly more time with Ginger than was usual with any pet we had previously owned. The cat followed her around the house like her shadow, never leaving her side, sitting at her feet in majestic silence as she cooked in the kitchen, its amber eyes fixed on her every move. At night, it slept at the foot of our bed, curled up like an orange ball, its eyes rarely leaving her sleeping face, as if guarding her from something. But slowly, very slowly, like the crawl of a snake, I began to notice more profound, and more alarming, changes in my beloved wife's behavior. The vibrant spark that used to radiate from her usual conversation had extinguished, and her resonant laughter, which used to fill the corners of the house with joy and life, had quieted. She became absent-minded much of the time, sitting before me as a body without a soul, as if she were listening intently to something no one else could hear, something echoing in distant spaces. She no longer shared meals with me at the table as we had for years, those precious moments when we would exchange stories about our day. Instead, she increasingly preferred to take her plate and retreat to the living room, with Ginger gracefully winding around her feet or settling possessively in her lap, eating small pieces of her food that she would toss to him from time to time, ignoring my bewildered and questioning glances. "Is everything all right, my love?" I asked her one evening, my heart heavy with her oppressive silence, which had become like a wall isolating her from me. I could see sadness etched on her features, but it was a strange sadness, mixed with a kind of resignation. She slowly lifted her eyes from the cat, which was licking its small pink tongue over its orange paw, and looked at me with a blank gaze for a few moments, a gaze that passed through me as if I were an invisible ghost. Then she said in a voice devoid of any expression, "Yes, everything is fine. Why do you keep asking such questions?" I answered her with a pang, "Because you seem different. Sad. Did something upset you? Is it because of my long absence? Please, talk to me." She shook her head no, with a slow, heavy movement, and returned her gaze to Ginger, as if looking at him provided a solace she couldn't find in anything else. "No, there's nothing to worry about. I'm just a little tired these days." But I wasn't convinced by her words. There was something deeper, something that went beyond mere fatigue. That cat, Ginger, had an overwhelming presence in the house, a presence that surpassed its small size. Whenever I looked at it, I felt that piercing gaze penetrating me, as if it were reading my thoughts, analyzing my motives, and judging me with a harsh silence. Its meow was not ordinary at all. Sometimes it would emit deep, mysterious hums, and at other times strange, sharp, and broken sounds, unlike any cat meow I knew, more like a private language of its own, a language understood only by it and my wife. One night, I woke up in the dead of night to the sound of a faint whisper, a soft feminine voice seeping from the living room. I got out of bed cautiously, my heart beginning to pound with increasing anxiety. I tiptoed, following the source of the sound until I reached the partially closed living room door. Through the narrow opening, I saw my wife sitting on the sofa in the darkness, barely illuminated by the threads of moonlight filtering through the window. Ginger was nestled in her lap, like a small orange statue. She was talking to it in a low, intimate voice, with words I couldn't initially distinguish. I moved closer, until my nose almost touched the wood of the door, held my breath, and focused all my senses. Finally, I managed to catch some scattered phrases from her strange conversation. "Yes, my dear, I understand you perfectly. I know what you want, and what you yearn for. It will be as you wish, don't worry. I will never let you down." She was talking to it as if she were answering questions posed by the cat, as if she were receiving orders or instructions from it. I froze in place, and I felt a cold horror creep into my heart, pumping ice into my veins. Who was she talking to? Was she delirious in her sleep while sitting up? Or was the cat? No, this was impossible, utter madness. The next day, I tried hard to broach the subject with her very cautiously, fearing I might explode at her or increase her isolation. "My love," I said as we were having breakfast, or rather, I was having breakfast while she stared blankly at her cold cup of coffee. "I heard you talking last night in the living room. Were you dreaming?" She looked at me with sudden sharpness, and said in a defensive tone, "Talking? Who do you think I was talking to?" "To Ginger," I said hesitantly, trying to make my voice sound normal and non-accusatory. Her eyes narrowed slightly, and a faint, sarcastic smile played on her lips. "And what's so strange about that? Don't many people talk to their pets? Weren't you doing that yourself with our old dog, Lucky?" "Yes, of course," I replied quickly, but it seemed different. More serious. As if you were having a real conversation, not just cooing at a pet. She was silent for a few moments, fiddling with a small spoon in her cup, then she said in a voice closer to a whisper, a voice that seemed to carry a heavy secret, "Sometimes I feel like its meow isn't just a meow. I feel like its hums carry words, as if it's whispering things to me that no one else understands." Then she shook her head quickly, violently, as if to dispel a disturbing thought that had crept into her mind, and said in a tone she tried to make casual, "Don't mind what I say, maybe I'm just imagining things due to lack of sleep." But I couldn't not care. How could I ignore such a disturbing admission? The strangeness of the relationship between her and the cat worsened gradually and alarmingly, like a malignant disease spreading through the body of our relationship. She no longer cared about her appearance as she used to, she who was the epitome of elegance and grace. She neglected her household duties, which she used to take pride in perfecting and loving, and dust began to accumulate in the corners, and the houseplants she used to care for with love had started to wither. Her eyes now held a hollow, dead look, even when she spoke to me on rare occasions. And on the few times she did sit with me, perhaps in an attempt to appease me or dispel my suspicions, she would suddenly furrow her brow, and turn involuntarily towards the cat, which would usually be lurking in some corner of the room, watching us silently, with its piercing amber eyes. She would say in a confused voice things like, "What? Now? But I can't at this moment." Then she would abruptly fall silent, and look at me with embarrassment, as if she had caught herself, or as if she had divulged a secret she shouldn't have. The strange smell in the house grew stronger day by day, that damp, earthy smell, which increasingly resembled the scent of freshly opened graves, now mixed with something sickeningly sweet, viscous, that clung to the nose and throat. I tried repeatedly to open the windows for ventilation, to dispel this suffocating miasma, but my wife would rush to close them immediately, with nervous movements, claiming that Ginger felt the cold easily, and that the outside air might disturb him. It all came to a head, the final straw, one bleak evening. I had returned from work exhausted, carrying the world's worries on my shoulders. All I wished for was some peace and quiet. I entered the house to find her sitting on the floor in the living room, in a strange posture, with Ginger perched in her lap like a small king on his throne. She was feeding it pieces of raw, blood-red meat from her plate, dripping blood, and whispering incomprehensible words to it, a private language between them. She would laugh from time to time, quiet, chilling laughs, laughs that had no joy in them, but were closer to the muffled cackles of someone who had lost their mind. I could no longer bear this surreal, gripping scene. I approached her, and said in a voice I tried hard to make firm and strong, despite the terror that was wringing my heart, "Enough. This is enough, woman. Look at yourself. Look at what you've become. This cat, it's affecting you very badly. It's destroying you and destroying our lives." She raised her head very slowly, as if she carried the weight of the world on her neck, and looked at me with eyes completely devoid of any human emotion, eyes like windows to an abyss. I felt in that moment that I was looking at a stranger, at a creature I didn't know, a creature that had taken over my wife's body. "What do you mean by that?" she asked in a voice as cold as ice, a voice as sharp as a razor. "I mean Ginger. That little devil," I shouted, my patience exhausted. "Ever since that damn cat entered our house, you've been changing for the worse day by day. You don't eat with me, you don't talk to me like before, you neglect yourself and you neglect our home, which used to be a paradise. It's not normal. This is not just a cat." I took a deep breath, trying to gather my courage, and said with finality, "This cat has to go. I'll take it myself to an animal shelter tomorrow morning, whether you agree or not." In that instant, as if my words were the key that unleashed a caged beast, her demeanor transformed before me horrifically. She sprang to her feet with a swift movement, and Ginger fell from her lap quietly, like a piece of silk, but its amber eyes were fixed on me with terrifying concentration, with the focus of a hunter watching its prey. My wife's eyes gleamed with a frightening, animalistic glint, and her facial features hardened into a mask of pure rage, a rage I had never seen on a human face in my life. "Don't you dare!" she screamed in a hoarse voice, a strange voice, not the gentle voice I knew and loved. "Don't you dare touch Ginger. Don't you even think about it. But he's making you sick. His poison." I cried out in desperation, trying to reach any remnant of sanity in her head. "Can't you see that? You're not well. You need help." She suddenly lunged, with a movement I hadn't expected from her, towards the kitchen. For a moment, it crossed my mind that she might be getting a glass of water to calm down, or perhaps she would break down crying. But instead, I heard the sound of sharp metal scraping, the sound of a knife being violently pulled from the kitchen drawer. The blood froze in my veins, and I felt the ground sway beneath me. She returned holding a paring knife, its blade gleaming, waving it in my face with nervous, unsteady movements, as if she couldn't control her hand. "If you try to take him from me," she said, panting, her eyes blazing like burning coals, I swear by his pure soul that I will hurt you. I won't let you. He's all I have. The horror that engulfed me in that moment cannot be described in words. This was no longer the wife I knew and loved. This creature standing before me, trembling with rage, threatening me with a knife, was something else, something dark and terrifying, something that had possessed her. I backed away slowly, step by step, raising my hands in a clear gesture of surrender, trying not to provoke her anger further. All right, my love," I said in a trembling voice, trying to calm her down. "Calm down, please. I won't do anything. I won't touch him. Just put the knife down." But she didn't calm down. She continued to stare at me with that crazed look, the knife in her hand trembling dangerously. I realized in that moment that I was in real danger, that my life was on the line. I seized a fleeting moment of distraction in her eyes, when she glanced for a second towards the cat, which was sitting perfectly still, watching the scene, and I pushed her with all my might to the side. She stumbled, losing her balance for a moment, and that was my chance. I ran as fast as I could towards the bathroom, slammed the door behind me, and locked it just in time. I heard her furious, hate-filled scream, then the heavy thud of her body against the door, trying to force it open. My heart was pounding wildly in my chest, like a trapped bird trying to break the bars of its cage, and my breath came in ragged gasps, barely able to draw air into my lungs. My hands trembled as I desperately fumbled for my phone in my pocket. I finally found it, called the police, and explained the situation in a broken, stuttering voice, barely able to string words together from sheer terror. They said they would send a patrol car immediately, and that I should stay calm and not open the door for any reason. And while I waited, leaning against the cold door, listening to her panting, angry breaths from the other side, I heard her begin to speak. She wasn't talking to me, nor was she screaming or threatening. Her voice had returned to that whispering, intimate tone I had heard her use when talking to the cat in the dead of night. "Don't worry, my love, my precious Ginger. I won't let him hurt you or take you away from me. We'll be fine. Just you and me. Together forever." She was talking to the cat. That orange, demonic thing that had destroyed our lives. Then, for the first time in my life, I heard another voice answer her from behind the door. It wasn't a meow, nor was it a hum. It was a thin, high-pitched voice, sharp as a knife's edge, coiling like a snake in the air, a voice utterly inhuman, whispering words in a language I didn't understand, an ancient, dark language, but it filled me with a horror beyond any description, a pure, primal terror. The cat was answering my wife. It was replying to her. My heart was pounding wildly in my chest, like a trapped bird trying to break the bars of its cage, and my breath came in ragged gasps, barely able to draw air into my lungs. My hands trembled as I desperately fumbled for my phone in my pocket. I finally found it, called the police, and explained the situation in a broken, stuttering voice, barely able to string words together from sheer terror. They said they would send a patrol car immediately, and that I should stay calm and not open the door for any reason. And while I waited, leaning against the cold door, listening to her panting, angry breaths from the other side, I heard her begin to speak. She wasn't talking to me, nor was she screaming or threatening. Her voice had returned to that whispering, intimate tone I had heard her use when talking to the cat in the dead of night. "Don't worry, my love, my precious Ginger. I won't let him hurt you or take you away from me. We'll be fine. Just you and me. Together forever." She was talking to the cat. That orange, demonic thing that had destroyed our lives. Then, for the first time in my life, I heard another voice answer her from behind the door. It wasn't a meow, nor was it a hum. It was a thin, high-pitched voice, sharp as a knife's edge, coiling like a snake in the air, a voice utterly inhuman, whispering words in a language I didn't understand, an ancient, dark language, but it filled me with a horror beyond any description, a pure, primal terror. The cat was answering my wife. It was replying to her. I froze in place, and I felt an icy cold seep into my bones, paralyzing my limbs. This wasn't the worst of it. Oh, I wish it had been. For a few moments after that demonic dialogue between my wife and the cat, other footsteps reached my ears from behind the door. They weren't my wife's light steps, whose sound I knew so well. These were heavy, deliberate steps, very long strides, as if a giant creature with unnaturally long legs was walking slowly, prowling the hallway. Those steps walked alongside my wife's, and then both sets of footsteps stopped right in front of the bathroom door, where I cowered in fear. I couldn't take this nightmare anymore. I started screaming with all my might, pounding on the door with my fists, begging them to go away, to leave me alone. I don't know how much time passed while I was in this state, trapped in this cramped bathroom, listening to that demonic conversation unfolding outside, and to the thud of those heavy, terrifying footsteps pacing the hallway, approaching and retreating. Every cell in my body was screaming in terror, and every nerve in my being yearned for salvation. Finally, after what felt like an eternity of torment, I heard loud, violent knocks on the front door of the house, then the sound of police officers announcing their presence, ordering the door to be opened. In that instant, my wife's whispering voice cut off, and those long footsteps vanished abruptly, as if they had evaporated into thin air. I heard a commotion outside, the sounds of shuffling feet, then my wife's sharp scream as she resisted violently. I waited a little longer, then opened the bathroom door very cautiously, my heart still pounding violently. The hallway was completely empty, except for some disarray left by my wife's struggle. I saw police officers leading her away. She was in a state of extreme agitation, screaming incomprehensible words, and looking around with wild, unfocused eyes, as if she didn't know where she was or what was happening. She said nothing about the cat. She didn't even look in my direction. They took her, and said they would transfer her to a psychiatric facility for evaluation and treatment. When things had calmed down a bit, and I had regained some of my composure, I asked one of the officers, my voice still trembling, "And the cat? Ginger, where is he? Did you find him?" The officer looked at me with obvious bewilderment, and said calmly, "Cat? We didn't see any cat, sir. We've searched the entire house, there's no trace of any cat here. They didn't find him. Ginger had disappeared just as he had appeared, suddenly and without a trace, as if he had never existed, as if he were merely a figment of my sick imagination. My wife is now in a psychiatric facility. The doctors say she's suffering from an acute nervous breakdown and auditory and visual hallucinations. They blame me indirectly, saying I left her alone for too long, and that loneliness might have pushed her to the brink of madness. Maybe they're right in part. Maybe I unintentionally neglected her. But I know what I saw and what I heard. I know that this is bigger and deeper than just a nervous breakdown. I'm writing this now from our home, or what used to be our home. I live here alone, in this desolate silence. I'm desperately trying to get my life back, to piece myself together, but it seems impossible. Every night, when complete silence descends upon the house, and everything is shrouded in darkness, I wake up suddenly.